So I wanted to start this panel discussion by first asking everyone to kind of paint for us in broad strokes your definition of luxury. We've heard a bunch of different definitions or interpretations, mainly things concerning time, money, ambition. So if you could just talk about what luxury means to you in a nutshell and how it applies to your respective fields.
Yeah, we go first.
Okay. So, better? Okay. So I already kind of gave a formal definition of luxury, but I feel like luxury is very personal, right? And I think scarcity is part of it. And so for me, time is probably the biggest luxury that I have, which is why I'm an entrepreneur. I watched my parents basically build businesses, and they were always working, but at the same time, they owned their own time, and they never had somebody telling them they had to go to work at this time or leave at this time. My dad would always pick up his phone calls, my phone calls during his meetings whenever I needed him. So I feel like flexibility of time was my own personal luxury, which is why I decided to become an entrepreneur. I think it's very personal for different people. I'm not one in terms of I love fashion, but at the same time, I'm not all about just luxury products. I think it's really important to mix it up. Half my closet's Uniqlo. But then, when it comes to real investment pieces, then that's what, I really love the luxury brands. So, again, I think it's different for everybody, and you really have to figure out what your own personal customers value if you market to them.
So luxury with time is almost a given for all of us, right? If anyone said to you, I'll give you an extra 150 hours in the day, will you take it? Right? So that would be a luxury for sure. But in terms of the field that I work in and I teach in terms of textiles itself, I consider luxurious material just stuff that looks really good, feels really beautiful, and I cannot have it very easily. So a cashmere throw or a cashmere shawl immediately rings a bell. Yeah, they'll have it. Just the whole idea of how something will feel against my skin, and that it's not easily available. It's not in abundance. But when I have it, it makes me feel, ooh, I've got a lot, right? So I usually associate it with something tactile, textural, and beautiful. So there's an intrinsic beauty to it, however simple or elaborate something is. And so in terms of textile, I would say a luxurious textile is something that is hard to come by and makes me feel extra special.
I think luxury is the ability to do extraordinary things that sometimes you do need a lot of means to do. For example, some of the most important innovations in design have come from the R&D, the research and design that happens around luxury products, high-end cars, for example. And that can trickle down and become available to the masses. There is, I don't know if any of you are too young for the Devil Wears Prada, but that brilliant thing that Miranda did about the sweater that came all the way from, that could have been a perfect clip for this, right? So there is this ability for luxury to provoke sort of great research and knowledge, and then so then for me, luxury should be generous, right? So if you have the ability to do extraordinary and exclusive things, you also then should have the ability to be generous with what you've learned and what you've developed. And it can also bring dignity, right? I think that dignity is something we need. So if you're privileged and you can buy a nice suit, you feel good in it, and that's great. And that gives you dignity. And then think about how others might also achieve that dignity.
To your point to generosity, I think yes, luxury should be generous. The women at Dior, they have been selected for 3 criteria: talent, ambition, and generosity. And from an HR perspective, I would say luxury is to remain exclusive without excluding.
So my next question, we began this panel session with one question, actually, right? Can luxury be a force for good? And for some, luxury in itself lies in direct opposition to social justice. So how would you respond to critics who say that luxury inherently advances inequality, especially along the class line?
This is the luxury.
I mean, I'll go back to this idea of, I just don't think the world is so black and white anymore. It's really rather gray. And again, learning when you're in a place of privilege is actually a wonderful thing. You shouldn't be begrudged that. If you are learning and you are in a beautiful auditorium, or with great faculty, that is a great thing. And so it doesn't mean that you have to keep it to yourself. At AI New York, we have a conscious shelter design initiative, which is that there are no standards actually for homeless shelters in New York, and we need to build 90. One of the architect who is chairing that initiative has designed houses for Calvin Klein, but he has also designed homeless shelters. And so he has a practice that is able to do both, and able to learn from one and bring dignity to both. And I think that that's an important thing to understand, to not be insecure if you have talent. You don't only have to do the high end. And because he is not getting criticized for designing homeless shelters by his high-end clients. So I think that's a kind of, there is a way, but you have to be able to carve out the time.
I absolutely think luxury can be a force for good, and I feel like I'm kind of a living example of it, because growing up as a little girl, actually Dior was like, my favorite brand, and probably still is. Couture especially. I was playing with Barbies, and all my life I would look at these couture gowns, and as a very shy little girl growing up in Dallas, Texas, I would make blankets make dresses out of blankets and pretend I was a princess and cut, jewelry out of catalogs and tape them to myself, watching the runway shows and pretending that I was like a princess too, in my efforts to want to look and feel beautiful. And through that, and then kind of like growing into my own and coming out of my shell, like fashion really helped to empower me, and so I stopped being so shy, I took on leadership roles, and it really helped develop my whole life, really. And because of that, that's why I, much like Christian Dior, my whole life mission is to help women to be beautiful and happy, because I feel like that's when they can really reach their full potential. And fashion and luxury is like all a part of a means to an end, right? So like going back to what I was talking about, how luxury can really inspire, like that's been my whole inspiration throughout my life is to be able to like take somebody, regardless of where they are, especially women, right, who are oftentimes insecure or self-conscious about themselves, make them feel beautiful, but inside and out, and then make them feel empowered to like change the world in whichever way they want.
I think I can take this. I would say yes, luxury does exclude people. It is by definition exclusive. I love that you said it is exclusive, but that is not intended to exclude. That the word itself, not to contradict, but the word itself means somebody cannot have if you're having it. So I don't think we need to feel guilt about having what somebody else cannot. But you can get a bit of a Robin Hood complex, right? So if I'm able to afford something, and luxury is that item that somebody else cannot, should I not buy it? I might be helping that person who produced it by purchasing it. There are craftspeople around the world who live in very, very, what we would call non-luxurious conditions, and a lot of the luxury market sustains those crafts. So, should I feel guilty about having something that my neighbor cannot buy? Perhaps not. Maybe I'm doing good by purchasing it, but just not to my next door neighbor, but to somebody around on another part of the planet. So I think there will always be tensions about the haves and the have-nots, and that is a conversation that comes up with having and owning luxury products and even selling it. But the way we say it can be a force for good is that as long as there is someone being lifted by that purchase, you don't have to feel guilty that you bought something that your neighbor can't have.
Yes, I think we can combine luxury with social justice as long as we separate the brand positioning is one thing and the employer and social impact is another thing. So I think this is really important to differentiate and to reconciliate maybe these two notions. As an employer, we recruit a lot of people, we contribute to education. So the way we recruit, the way we are treating the employee, this is really important. And this is where we have actually to do things differently. Because having a social impact and contributing to a social justice doesn't mean, from an HR perspective, to continue to do the same thing, to recruit, to develop people with an ethic. We have to really rethink the way we have a conversation with candidates, the way we have conversation with our employees. So this is really what we have to rethink if we want to go one step further.
So, is ethicalization just a trend? Or is there ways that the industry can make ethicalization evergreen? How can the luxury industry, what should the luxury industry be doing, or what is it currently doing to make sure that luxury stays a force for good?
I'll state off the bat, all luxury is not a force for good. Luxury can be a force for good, and I think that's also to your point, it depends on who is selling, who is making, and what they're doing. So just because we say yes, luxury can be a force for good, it doesn't mean that everyone who's producing luxury goods or everyone who's purchasing luxury goods is doing good in the world. I think that's where you bring in the idea of ethics, and I think our education system, the fact that we're sitting here in Parsons, we make sure that our students are educated in the area. We bring awareness to issues that are important for us to know. And ethics should come from the very internal part of the person who's practicing design. And ethics should not be just a label you tag on. It is a marketing tool. Of course, everything can become a marketing tool. But it starts from an intention of doing good. But that doesn't guarantee just because we're saying yes, luxury can be a force for good, all luxury is good.
So the big change for me is social network. There was a time where brands they gave corporate communication, they gave information and decided which internal information they wanted to give, they wanted to make public. Now what is very different is that everyone accesses information. There is a lot of transparency. So this has really changed the way we operate, and probably it's aiming for more responsibility.
I think it has become fashionable to have an ethical stance, but I think it is only effective when it's partnered with accountability. So if, for example, with the Zero Waste Initiative we did, we asked firms to sign up for a zero waste challenge, and they had all the trash and recycling weighed 2 months ago, and they were asked over a period of 2 months to have regular weigh-ins, and we're about to announce the results of who reduced their trash. So they couldn't just sign on and say, yeah, we're a firm who cares, and we're going to reduce waste, and we're going to put a badge up, and we're going to put it on our social media. It's actually has to be monitored, and there are real ways in which to make change, and it's hard work. And so I think that all these initiatives that companies are doing must be monitored and held accountable and called out, or else they're kind of hypocritical.
So actually, in Asia, sustainability is not very sexy and it's not very fashionable. But we haven't gotten to that point over there yet, because I feel like as people come in, it's like the nouveau riche, you saw Crazy Rich Asians, they love to flaunt their wealth, and they really couldn't care about if this bag was made in a sustainable way or not, because that's more of a cultural thing, which I feel will evolve eventually. So I really do think the key is education. Education, and then making it appealing in a way that integrates with their current values, right? So like, again, 3 years ago, I could not get any of the socialites to rent. I could get their addresses and rent them out, but to actually get them to wear a rented thing was like, forget it. But now I've seen it really shift, and one thing is like, yeah, it's eco-friendly, but another thing is just like, oh, it saves me space in my closet, right? And because I have really good styles, they're not so much like saving money, but it's just like, in line with their values, they want to look beautiful, and if it helps save the money, and if it helps the planet, then okay, that's a bonus. But you can't forget what they really value, and what is really trending in the moment, right? So I think it's just like integrating all of that together to reach your end goal. And maybe it's not such a straight line, but you kind of have to package it well.
I want to talk more about accountability. Let's start with who. Who can hold these industries accountable, and how can we, or whoever that group is, do that?
It's up to the buying public, right? So accountability is in your hands, and you get to say, I will make that choice with my wallet. I think we had recently the example when, I'm going to name names, is that okay? Burberry, they burned up a lot of their inventory of unsold product. That was $38 million worth of luxury product. Literally up in flames. Now, that was horrifying to know about. But the public spoke up. There was an uproar about it. They have now sworn they will never do that again. That's a good start. I mean, the population that's aware that it even happened made a noise about it. And now Burberry has to convince us for us to buy it, that they're not going to be wasting product. Now, is that sustainable in any way? They just destroyed all their ideas of what would have been a good product. If you've produced in excess, it's already bad design. You haven't planned, your process and supply chain is all requiring a new look. So I think the public speaks, and I think that's where the accountability will start. We can regulate till the cows come home, and there's nobody monitoring the regulators, and it keeps going on. It's good to have some rules, but I think vote with your wallets.
Another example of accountability is the United Nations Women Empowerment Principle. It's 7 principles that corporations can commit publicly, and they have to report every year about what they are doing, and it's public, so anyone can go to the United Nations website and have access to this information, and I think that's really a way to make it concrete and to be accountable for anyone.
Great, I think now it's time to hold this panel accountable. So let's open up the panel to question and answers. If anyone has a question, they'll have answers, I think.
Hi, thank you for your input. So I have a question about do you think brands are becoming less selective of their customers with the coming of Rent the Runway and more streetwear? Can luxury be obtained by the masses now?
I guess I'll start since, for obvious reasons. Like I said, I don't think you're diluting your brand by necessarily making it accessible, although that's kind of the first instinct, right? And again, it's just when we're talking about self-actualization, it's I'm gonna buy this Birkin for me, but just because my friend can rent one doesn't mean that that means anything less to me. I don't think, I was in Dubai 2 days ago, and my friend stays at the Burj Khalifa, right? It's the tallest building. I got to go up, I didn't have to wait in line. But the tourists got the same view I got, just same floor next door, right? But my friend's paying so much money for the same view, but everybody else gets the same thing, right? But that didn't dilute my experience and that kind of feeling of luxury and how I felt about how amazing this building was. Just because there's millions of other people that got the same experience, on the other side of the wall. So, I feel like that's what really distinguishes luxury from other brands is that they're innovators and they're leaders, right? And they have to constantly push. They're the ones leading the conversations and the trends, and that's why they also have to be more accountable and why it's so important for them to lead the conversation in sustainability, because all the other brands are going to follow, right? And people know, when you're renting something, you have your own reasons, or maybe, they start off that way, but eventually, it's to ownership, right? Just because we can maybe afford a yacht doesn't mean we necessarily want to buy a yacht, but we'll just rent one when we need one. Whereas other people, they do want to own yachts, and that's okay. So I feel again, it's not black or white. I think right now we're in an era where people, will shop at, H&M when they're shopping at Gucci, and they're also shopping, for different things, for different reasons, right? And at different phases of their life as well.
To just go back a bit to equity and accountability, I think, yes, the consumer, but I do think people have to vote and vote for things, right? We are seeing a complete breakdown in our public infrastructure and our public works in this country, which is about dignity and believing that everyone deserves good facilities. If you look at Grand Central Station or the main branch of the New York Public Library, these were palaces for the public. And we are not seeing a push for this now. We are not, the citizenry has to demand this because we had it before. And you have situations like Penn Station, which is an absolute insult to the citizenry, and that we could do so much better with. But we have to vote and demand as a public that we deserve to have access to the most beautiful kind of public palace of a train station, whatever the design ends up being, or else we will just suffer, and everyone will suffer except for those few who really don't have to use any public facilities.
Hi, my name is Calixto. Thank you, great conversation. And my thought is, are we in a moment or in a time where actually luxury is defined by each of us, meaning it's so individual that in the past, brands or companies or even experiences defined what luxury was, and now it's more about the individual, meaning the freedom to, I did that, I left my job 3 years ago to come back to school, finished full-time fashion, graduated in May, and now looking for a job. And for many people, my peers, I'm 40, it was a luxury. But for other people, is a need to go back to school and learn new skills for the new jobs. So the question is, are we in a moment where each individual is defining what luxury is, regardless what's going on around them?
I think the simple answer is we're always in that moment. Luxury is determined by the experiencer of the luxury, but you're also often told by a brand that this is a luxury brand. So if there is some context in which you decide what is luxury for you, how it's marketed to you, and then what desires are fed in you, right? So if it fulfills a specific desire for you that was out of reach at one point of time and now is in your hand, you call that a luxury. So there is that non-standardized aspect to it. It becomes individual in terms of perception, but it also is specific to how something is marketed within a culture or society.
Hi, this is Wei speaking. I'm curious, since we're talking about luxury as a force for good, what is the role that the state or government have in this? Because you talk about public infrastructure. Clearly, for the public to have a voice in this, we can't not talk about government.
So, for me, alluding back to some of the initiatives we're doing, let's think about sustainability in architecture and design. It's very expensive right now to build yourself a very sustainable house with a green roof. And so it's really a shame because sustainability in architecture, with the amount of buildings that contribute to the carbon footprint of the city, really should be something that's accessible. But that has to be legislated, right? We have to have incentives, tax breaks, programs that promote business of sustainability, to make those products accessible, to make incentives for people to invest in new buildings or new windows in their buildings actually, or green roofs or new products. And so there is a regulatory issue here, and there are ways in which the government can help. Back to the accountability thing and the government regulations, some of the laws that are changing around sustainability that I alluded to that we are working on, for example, 80% carbon reduction by the year 2050, that is going to be based on a fines so building owners will be fined if their buildings are not compliant. Our question is, will the fines actually be enough for big developers to just, if they're not really so strict, they will just pay the fines and not comply, right? And none of them are going to go to jail. So how are these government programs really policed and framed in a way that it makes sense and that there are incentives to actually comply?
Comment on this as well, because I feel like governments, like luxury brands, are in positions of power. And again, with great power, you have a big microphone, right? So I think their role is to really set the example. So I'm coming from Singapore, and if anyone has watched Crazy Rich Asians, you know how luxurious the city is. It's crazy. It's been ranked #1 most expensive city like 3 years in a row, right? And it really is that way. Like, it's a utopian bubble that when I come back to the U.S., I feel like I'm in a third world country sometimes, right? But it's also one of the greenest cities in the world, right? And I don't know if you know that wedding scene where they're all amongst the super trees. So that entire area is powered by the super trees, which all have solar panels, and they like that. Everything is so like sustainable in that country. It's ridiculous. but that doesn't take away from how luxurious it is. And I think there was a time, you know, when, especially when I was in college, I wanted to have an eco-friendly line. And then I went to a textile show, and there was no luxurious green textiles. You know, I wanted to make all my dresses out of eco-friendly fabrics, and they were awful, right? And I wanted to make a luxury product, and I couldn't. And that was a challenge because, you know, and back then it was like all kind of hippy-dippy stuff that was green and it wasn't sexy at all. But now, you know, it's governments like Singapore that are showing like you can be super luxurious as well as super sustainable and eco-friendly, and those can coexist. And that sends a signal to other governments and other brands or other people that, you know, you can have it. You can have it all.
I have a slightly different take on it. I mean, this is, as you can see, I tend to have slightly different takes on things. But I think it may be the role of the government is to do what we expect is luxurious and provide it to everyone so no one is excluded and so it's no longer experienced as a luxury. So I think, you know, as entrepreneurs and in the capitalist mode, you want to sell it and, you know, keep it limited into a few hands. But I think the government in turn should do what maybe the government of Singapore does, which is offer it as common property to all. That it's not a luxury, it's a given in your society. Maybe that's the role of government, sort of it counters and balances so that there's a sense of equality and equitable distribution.
I think we have time for one more question. Take one.
Hi, my name is Esme, and my question is very direct. We have talked about luxury towards one edge, and also towards the understanding of simplicity. So could you please redefine, because I've heard and I've read that the ultimate luxury is simplicity. So how does that come back to your ideas of making things that are supposed to be luxurious to make that simple and accessible for everyone?
I love that comment because, again, I was just in Dubai and I went to the Burj Al Arab, which is a 7-star hotel, right? And I hadn't been there. It's supposed to be the most luxurious hotel on the planet. And I walk in there, I'm like, oh my God, this place is awful. Like, it was the most, I felt like I was on a movie set for like Aladdin or something. Like everything was so gaudy and tacky and it looked like it was made out of plastics and it smelled like a cruise ship. It was just like super weird and not what I expected at all, right? But then, you know, it's a 7-star hotel, it's supposed to be ultimate luxury, and it wasn't simple and it was really awful. So again, like, I think that it goes back to what is luxury for different people, right? Something luxurious for Chinese and Russians are very different than what's luxurious for Americans, for example, right? We love iPhones and Apple. The brand Apple is very simple, right? They've made it so sophisticated and simple, but I've recently switched to Samsung, and it's actually a more sophisticated phone that I find that more luxurious now, you know? So again, I think it's a matter of what's personal to you. And it's like a great definition of luxury.
From an architectural perspective, simplicity has also often been luxury. It's actually kind of a farce that simple spaces are inexpensive. The legendary architect Mies van der Rohe, the modernist, exhibited this. People thought that, for example, the Seagram building on Park Avenue is simple, but it's completely not simple. In fact, the I-beams on the outside that make it look like they're structural are all decorative and require a special kind of treatment in order to do this. So we have to be careful because sometimes say, he said less is more. Robert Venturi, who just passed, said less is a bore. So sometimes, and another Venturism is messy vitality. So we have to be careful. Sometimes to achieve simplicity, right, it is luxury and it's not less expensive, and it's not actually really, it's sort of masquerading as simple. I think in terms of just daily life, to think outside of architecture, actual healthy food, simple healthy food is such a luxury sometimes. And it's so hard, right? Even catering for events and such like that, we are plied with all kinds of unhealthy things, and as simple is a piece of organic fruit. Simple, I think of it as a luxury, but I wish we could have it more at our gatherings, and it's prohibitive. So I think actually luxury simplicity rather than embellished can be, it has to be held accountable, right? To see what's underneath the simplicity, and maybe trying to identify what truly is simple and good. That's a good bar for luxury.
From an HR perspective, I like the word simplicity because it comes really to coming back to the fundamental. And let me give you an example. There is a trend in corporation today is to work on well-being of employee, and some company organize seminars, and actually we have tested as well. And we organize seminars to teach people how to be happy at work, and there are these chief happiness officers and so on. And yes, it exists. So I've tested. I don't believe in it. I think being happy at work is a consequence about having the means to do your work, about being recognized, and about being paid. So it should start like this, this is the fundamental. So let's get the fundamentals right, and then people will be happy at work.
All right, let's conclude, and remember to register to vote.
I'd like to thank everyone for coming here. A lot of these panelists have been coming actually from abroad. Erin, Singapore, Carol, Singapore, and Erin coming from Paris. And then, we have a new program happening here, MFA Textiles. Definitely talk to Preeti, that's 7th floor, is that? 7th floor. And if you want to check out the mirror cycling machine that does bespoke kind of planet type of things, we did acquire one that's on the 2nd and 3rd floor, and that's at the maintenance center. I'm going to plug. Thank you, everyone here. Thanks, Ben, for bringing up Mies van der Rohe, less is more, and then Cherise, less is more, and then Biarke is like more is more, right? So I think there's definitely a lot more discussion. Again, if you want to ask more of these questions, feel free to hashtag. And I'll do a final plug again. If you guys would like to please go outside and answer some of these questions or write your own, we would love to kind of collect these as answers and questions to further kind of develop the larger discussion at Parsons, and hopefully make this as part of the curricula and kind of redefine the kind of discussion that we're going to have here as an institution. What our responsibilities are to look at the future of luxury, or what does that mean? Again, I want to thank everyone here. Thank you so much. If you are interested in actually meeting the individuals, feel free to come up. We do have a keynote that is starting at 3, and that would be Mark Pina. He is the ECD, he used to be ECD at Spring Studios, and now he is at Air Paris. So again, feel free to come. He will be here and giving his lecture. Actually sneakily in the back right now if you want to